Hello, long time no see to everyone. But
Hey,
hello. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today, right now, we are doing the What Makes a Game Dev panel here at Salt Flats 2021. My name is Courtney Nickerson. I'm the moderator for today's discussion, as well as the board secretary for ASA. Today's panel focuses on game development as a career, and then specifically discusses game jams. By the end of this panel, we do hope that at least one person is interested in learning more, or perhaps even gives it a shot themselves. Now, just before we jump into the game dev panel, I just want to define what a game jam is for those that don't know. Similar to like musical jams, a game jam is a place where individuals with varying talents come together to create something. And in this case, this particular something is a board or a video game. They're typically given only a theme and a time constraint, where participants rapidly prototype game designs and inject new ideas to help inspire and grow the gaming industry. The brief time span is meant to help encourage creative thinking, which results in small but innovative and experimental games, some of which have actually developed beyond the game jam stage into commercial successes. So joining me today is Allyson, Craig, and Scott. Starting with Allyson, do you mind just giving a brief introduction for yourself?
Sure. So I'm Allyson Cikor. I kind of have a foot in multiple camps. So my husband and I are co-owners of a small VR indie game studio based out of Lethbridge. Represent Lethbridge. I know we have a lot of people from Calgary and Edmonton here. We're coming up, little brother in Alberta. I also do a little bit of work with the larger studios. I'm currently a contract environment artist with Improbable out of Edmonton, and I'm an instructor at the Lethbridge College in the virtual and augmented reality program.
Thank you. Craig.
Hi, so my name is Craig Pfau. I've been involved with game development advocacy in Alberta since 2013, when I founded the Calgary Game Developers Meetup Group. And then in 2018, I founded the Alberta Makes Games advocacy project to showcase games that have been made here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Scott.
nice. Right on. So my name's Scott, and I've been in software development. So I actually really don't have a game development background, but I've been in software development for about 15 years now professionally, and I started making games back probably late high school, and then just do it completely as a hobbyist. So I'm a huge advocate for it as well, and I work with Ali and Craig in the past with kind of some different groups around game development specifically.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I guess first question is, what got you interested in working in game development? Craig, we'll start with you, I guess, this time.
Oh, okay. Well, this will be interesting because like Scott, Scott makes games. I don't actually make games. I create communities. And I got involved with game development more or less out of boredom. I had moved to Calgary and had no real groups to hang out with, so I created one.
I love that answer. Scott, you kind of mentioned a little bit, but would you like to elaborate?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I like being a hobbyist. I have been making games for the better part of the 20 years there, even before I even started doing regular software. And, just as a kid, I just loved escaping into the worlds that you had, even back in the day when they were just ASCII, where that's just like a bunch of text on the screen and you had to almost like imagine what the world was like. It was just awesome to just kind of escape to it, much like a book does for you, but you get to escape, and you get to affect that world as well. So I just wanted to be a part of that, wanted to kind of create things, building worlds, even down to the details where I get to control what the blades of grass do in that world. Like, that's the type of control that you get in making games. So it's super exciting.
That's so cool. Ali.
Scott, a man after mine own heart. I've been dealing with grass all afternoon. For me, I guess I don't remember a time I didn't want to do game dev. I think I have since I was little. I used to doodle or write little game ideas. And I guess as I got older, I sort of went through different phases where I thought I wanted to be a writer. And then an illustrator, and then a concept artist, and then a character artist. And I tried all those things, and then kind of eventually settled into the love of my life, which is environment art. But yeah, I don't know what really got me into it. I guess I love the storytelling aspect of it, both as a gamer and game developer. And then once you kind of get into game dev, the community is so supportive, both internally and externally. Working with other developers, they're some of the most creative, passionate people I've ever met. Same goes for people in the community. Same goes for gamers. Very few medium have that, you know? So it's addicting. It's very, very inviting and a lot of fun.
That is awesome. I guess I will then throw it right back at you and ask, what do you think is the most important thing to consider when starting game development?
Oh God. There's a few things. I would say, first of all, it's hard. It's very hard. There's a lot of tools nowadays that help with developing games. You know, you have your engines. You also have engines that really sort of give you the box full of Legos, and you can learn to code as you go. You don't have to go 4 years of computer science before you can make a game. But that being said, it can take hundreds or thousands of hours to make a game sometimes, and that's when you know what you're doing. So it's something that you kind of dive head first into, and you have to be prepared to spend a lot of time on it and not get discouraged. It's going to take you 2 months to make a barrel look good, just to get to that point, or 2 months to make the wind blow. But once you've done it, then you can scaffold from there. So I meet a lot of people that get into games, or they try it and they're like, yeah, it wasn't for me. But you really have to think of it as a long game. And then I would also say, I guess it depends what you want to do with games. So those of us on the panel, I mean, we all have very different backgrounds. Scott, you're more like hobbyist indie. Craig, you're on the community side. I do a little bit in education and indie and AAA. And those are all very different avenues. So when you get into it, think about what you want to do with it. Do you want to be a hobbyist and make your own games for yourself? Do you want to go AAA? Do you want to just be involved in the community and support creators? There's so much you can do there. And yeah, my advice is just dive in, but be prepared that it is a very deep pool.
Scott, I mean, you work on the software development side, and you've just hobby made your games. What do you think is the most important thing to consider when you start?
Yeah, I will. Ali, you kind of touched on a lot of topics there, because one of my big ones was it is challenging. When you're doing it as a hobbyist as well, there's a lot of time management with that, right? Like if I work all day on my day job, then I have to have the energy to work all night on a project. So that can be quite challenging in itself and just quite draining. So you do have to be quite passionate about what you're doing to kind of keep that drive up. And I can't stress enough, like, you can kind of start with an interest, right? So if you want to be an artist or a programmer, even audio, or there's design and producing, like there's a lot of disciplines in game development that you can start at, even at a hobbyist level. Now, typically when you're in the indie scene, you do a lot, like you wear a lot of hats, right? So you'll end up being the artist, the programmer, and the audio engineer for a while. But then you start working with communities and you start finding people with interests, similar interests, and you'll be able to kind of join together, and you become a powerhouse. Maybe. That's kind of the hope there.
Thank you. So obviously, Craig, you're more on the community side, but is there anything that you want to add to like starting up game development? Like what from a community side almost does that look like?
I would say just there are groups within Alberta to join. So as Scott and Ali both said, it can be hard, it can be time consuming, but by joining a community and talking with people through the problems that you have to solve, then it makes your life a lot easier. Other people have probably had the same issues as you, there's also not just local groups, but join the worldwide groups that will definitely help you out.
I think that's a really good thing to bring up, especially like I know for myself, I do project management, but don't ever ask me to design anything. So I think that's really good to bring on. So we talked about that we want to talk about game jams, and we define that. But I really want to kind of dig in and like, what does a game jam offer that long format development doesn't? Like, what are the pros and cons? Why do you do it? Why put yourself under that time crunch?
Good question.
You want to go, Allie?
It's funny because when you're on your 30-second hour of being awake and chewing through these problems, you will ask yourself the same question: why do I do this to myself every year? But it's part of what Craig said, where there's a lot of passion it takes to do that, to spend your weekend 48 hours making a game from nothing when games generally take months or years to develop. But to be in the same room, or in this case, be in the same Discord chat, I guess we were online this year, with people who are that passionate is really inspiring and really exciting. And it's not so much about creating, the next big hit. Big hits have come out of game jams, but it's just the fun of it, and you get to make things that you don't normally get to do. So Scott, you mentioned that generally people will have a profession or a specialization, I guess, especially once you've been in the industry for longer, if you're working with larger studios. Like what I do, I make props and pieces for environments, and that's it. I don't make characters, I don't make audio, but when I do indie stuff, I get to touch all of that. I can do whatever I want, or I could do something I've never done before, make a dating simulator, when I tend to make VR games, right? So it really is just bring all these passionate people together, have a bunch of fun over 48 hours or however long the game jam is, and just play with the medium.
Yeah, of course. Scott, Craig, do either of you have anything you'd love to add to that? I'd love to hear.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I could. Yeah. The game jams are kind of a huge topic for me because, like, I've personally been in a part of about, I think, 12 now of the global game jams. So, and I think I've done about 4 or 5 external game jams as well. So, over the years, over the last 15 years, I've pretty much been a part of game jam. So, the intense schedule for me is quite nice. It's kind of a you kind of ride that high almost the whole weekend. Like it's you're with a whole bunch of creative people. You're kind of building this new experience that you've always wanted to try, but you've never had the time or whatnot. So you kind of dedicate that time to the weekend to do it. And I find those are just amazing creative exercises. So just being able to practice and practice and practice. That's kind of what game jams do for me, for sure.
That is amazing. Craig, do you have anything that you'd like to add about why do communities build game jams? Like why?
So I'll just add that they're very, for lack of a better word, newbie safe. Like you don't need to have a lot of experience. You can come in, join a team. It's perfectly fine if you don't contribute a lot, but you should definitely try. But and then to touch on something that Allie just mentioned, which was that you get to try something new. So especially for those that are kind of perhaps in a sort of rut of working on the same game for a year or 2 or 3, it's nice to be able to try out a new, work on a new mechanic or something like that your game doesn't already have. So you do get to create kind of this diverse portfolio and play around while you're there.
I really like hearing that it feels newbie safe.
Oh yes.
I think a lot of people are probably pretty scared to hear 3 powerhouses of the industry saying, yeah, we do it all of the time. And you think that you have to have that level of experience, but it sounds like game jams are the perfect way to just kind of get your feet wet, just try something for a short period of time, see what you can create.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add, like with game jams, you're kind of given a theme, and that can kind of kickstart some ideas that maybe you were struggling with, trying to find those ideas to just even try. So that's what I kind of love.
Mm-hmm.
Now the fun question. Do you guys have any strong memories, good or bad, from a game jam?
All bad.
All bad. That's why we keep doing it 12 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, how much can I talk about without getting into trouble? But no, seriously, I have a really good lead into that, actually, because the first game jam I ever went to would have been 2011 or 2012. And it was actually Craig running it back when it was at Mount Royal, I think. And it was at a point when I was going to school to become a concept artist, and I can't draw. So I wasn't doing very well. I nearly flunked out of college. And I heard about this thing called the Game Jam, and so I was like, okay, I'll try it. And they really promoted that newbies could do it. I had no experience, couldn't code, didn't know what a Photoshop was. At the time, it wasn't the big thing that it is now. And so I showed up as an art student with a pad of paper and some charcoal. I'm not sure what I intended to do exactly with that charcoal, but I recognize that as a turning moment for me when I was like, this is what I want to do. This is my people, and this is my passion. And all I really managed to accomplish, I think, was I built a loading screen for the game. The theme that year was Ouroboros. I don't know how you pronounce it. But I just made like a little snake eating its tail, and it spun around, and it took me like 30 hours to make. But I still have that on my computer because it was the first thing I ever made for a game, and it was such a turning point, and it really led into this whole thing of knowing Craig, starting up the Game Jam in Lethbridge. I met Scott through Game Jam, and so it's amazing what that can really do for someone who's maybe kind of sort of interested but doesn't know where to start.
Wonderful. That is amazing. Honestly, hearing that is so cool.
No pressure, Craig.
Yeah. Craig, I guess we'll make you go next.
Oh, okay. So my experience has been that I participated in one global game jam, and then I organized and ran 6, and now I'm the regional organizer for all of Canada. So that's my experience with Game Jam, with Global Game Jam specifically. As far as a specific memory, I remember, so this doesn't have anything to do with actually making a game, but I remember the first night staying at the University of Calgary, their Taylor Digital Arts Library, staying there and being so hungry, and there was no food. So that's one thing that kind of stuck with me, that when I was organizing after that, I'd try to provide snacks and have food be delivered and all that kind of stuff. So that was one of the memories that I have.
Yeah.
Did you sleep on the bean bags at that place?
No, I slept on the padded benches. But
Nice.
the lights are on the whole time, so it's hard to sleep.
Yeah.
Wow. Scott.
Yeah. Well, the sleeping thing is always funny because when we were in-person game jams, like they typically would start on the Friday night and then you would go straight till Sunday. So you kind of didn't leave the building for that amount of time. So you see like the first couple hours, people would go and hunt all the bean bags or the best couches and stuff, and they would kind of claim those just in preparation for the night where they're going to try to catch a couple hours of sleep here and there. I remember bringing like foamies and just putting them up underneath the desk, and just when I crashed at about 5 a.m, I would just go and sleep for about 2 hours and then get back up and get back at it again. So the lack of sleep is a big memory for me. But again, though, you're kind of riding that high. I want to like that, just the exhilaration of kind of making something, and there's always aha moments, right? So you go through all this pain of trying to get this little block of code working, and then just click, it just works, And it may not work exactly like you want, but most of the times it would be like a funny physics event would happen, and like you're just on the ground laughing because of lack of sleep, or you're just things are starting to not look the same, I would say. But those are some of my like favorite memories. And
Yeah, it's
from
funny
that,
you
for sure.
mentioned the sleep thing, because you can almost tell who's a game jam veteran by how they sleep. So you have the people who came totally unprepared and they like have to sleep on the floor under a desk somewhere. Then you have the second or third years who find the comfy chairs and the bean bags. And the fourth and fifth ones have bean bags, but they're like huddled around the radiators because they know that it gets cold. And then after like 6 and 7 years, you just go home and sleep like a normal person. So you kind of come full cycle. But yeah, you'd be like looking for a beanbag to sleep in. You'd have to lift it up and make sure someone's not under there. And it's a lot of fun. It's a big sleepover for developers. Not much sleeping, but yeah.
Do we have any other memories we want to talk about before we move on? Any exciting first year or cool things that have come out of game jams, like either like specific projects or something that you like learned that was like a really interesting thing that you learned just specifically at a game jam?
Yeah. I think like still one of my most favorite things is, Ali and I were at that Ouroboros game jam. So Ouroboros was the theme that year, and we were at the same jam and we had no idea who each other were, right? So it just kind of, and I think we went to the next two jams and then finally met each other. And so, the friends that you meet during these things, it just, they're lasting. And then kind of Ali and I are working together to kind of build a development group down here in Lethbridge. And those are long lasting memories that definitely I'm going to take with me for a really, really long time.
I guess very briefly, how many people tend to be in a game jam?
Really
Do you have the
varies.
numbers, Craig? Oh.
Generally, I think Edmonton ends up closer to so I'm just spitballing here, but I think Edmonton ends up around 100 people, Calgary around 50, and is it fair to say Lethbridge is 20, 25?
Yeah, when we're in person, 2025.
Wow. That is a lot of people and a lot of opportunities to meet people. That is awesome. And I guess on that note of Edmonton v Calgary v Lethbridge, what kind of communities exist here in Alberta? And I mean, Craig, you're probably going to be the best person to talk about this. And like, where can we find these resources?
So first off, there's Alberta Makes Games, which I'll just do some self-promotion here because that's mine. So albertamakesgames.com has a ton of information as far as communities, games, schools to go to, like games that are in development, just a ton of different things. Events, which there's not a ton of with COVID going on, but other than that, there is the Interactive Arts Alberta, which may currently be on hiatus. I'm not entirely sure. So as far as provincial groups, there's Alberta Makes Games, Interactive Arts Alberta, and then I do also want to mention that Digital Alberta and ESIO are doing a lot more with video games these days. So those, I guess ESIO is Edmonton based, but Digital Alberta is definitely doing a lot more. Regional groups, you have the Calgary Game Developers Association. In Edmonton, you have the Game Camp Edmonton, as well as there's YEG FemDev. So that is a monthly meetup group for gender minorities that's based in Edmonton. And then down in Lethbridge, you've got the Lethbridge Game Developers Guild, which is run by Ali. And then even if you're a student, there are the McEwen Game Development Club in Edmonton, the Nate Game Creators Space, which is in Edmonton. Also in Edmonton, there is the U of A, the Games Den is what they're called. And then down in Calgary here, there is the U of C Game Design Club. those are the ones that I'm aware of, and all of the links for those are on the Alberta Makes Games website. So you can get their Twitter, their Discord invite links, their website links, all of those there.
Wonderful. I do think that it was posted in the chat.
Okay.
So I shall make sure to copy and paste that one more time so that everyone can see the Alberta Makes Games. Yes, wonderful. We're going to put it a bazillion times because it is so important. It is so important for people to realize how many communities there are out there. So, and I guess on that note, are there any like local devs, projects, games that you guys would like to particularly shout out or draw attention to?
Let's see. I could. I probably got the little shameless plug as well. So, one thing I didn't mention before. I am the face. I guess you can now put a face to RPS. So if you had any complaints about it, you could definitely send them my way, or anything good that you have about it. Yeah, I've been working on that, but I've also been working with a super talented artist, Jace, which I got to plug Little Hellions as well, just being a local developer, and he actually has, I believe, a stream as well going on coming tomorrow, I believe. But one thing too I wanted to highlight, and definitely Craig and Ali remind me if I forget well, I definitely forgot a few, but if everyone remembers that game that Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. So there was that kind of that mixture of VR and the real world thing that actually came out of a game jam. So that's one of the kind of success stories that they prototyped that whole concept where they had pieces of paper spread out everywhere. They had whiteboards filled with little puzzles. And then they actually had a VR set that weekend. So in 2 days, they were able to kind of prototype that concept and then probably developed it again for about another year before releasing it. But that's a big one that I remember.
That's amazing. Because, yeah, I remember when VR first came out, that was one of the biggest games that you could play on it, was this cool mix of in-person and VR. And to know that came just from a bunch of people getting together for 2 days to create what would become Keep Talking, Nobody Gets That is.
Yeah. I always forget the name. I had to look it up. Long name on that one, but there's tons and tons of games that came out of Game Jam, either Global Game Jam or another one, Ludum Dare, which is another really big one that runs about 2 or 3 times a year, online only. And that one is kind of fun because there's this big feedback loop to it too. So you get to submit your game and then you spend about 2 weeks rating games and you get a lot of really good feedback. A bunch of streamers will pick up those games and they'll play them live for you. And that's like invaluable for anyone making a game, that they could just watch someone enjoy what they had created. And that, I can tell you, is so rewarding.
And so, sorry, what is that one called again?
Ludum Dare is, Ludum Dare there. Brad just linked it there, or spelled it out, at least. It's one of those ones that no one knows how to say it. So it's Ludum Dare, Ludum Dare, Ludum Dare. I don't know.
Yeah, because I think that's really valuable, because we do have a lot of content creators as well in this space, and just knowing that you can connect to a lot of indie developers and try these out, I think that's really valuable to know. Ali, I'd love to give you the chance to shamelessly self-plug as well.
Unfortunately, what I'm working on is so early in development, there's nothing really to plug. But if any of you are VR gamers, we did release our first title back in 2018. It's called Ethereum. It's up on Steam, and I believe it's still on 5-port. But we try to make VR games that are really use the medium, I guess. I got into VR very early as an undergraduate and started taping infrared cameras to things that they probably shouldn't have been taped to, and have just always wanted to explore that medium. So yeah, Ethereum was our first crack at it. I apologize in advance if it makes you a little motion sick. Shouldn't if you have your sea legs, but yeah, we're really early days into a new VR project. If anyone is interested in game dev but doesn't necessarily want to be a developer, I think Scott made a good point in that we're always looking for people to test our games. And as indies, we don't have a big QA department. We can force our family and friends to play them, but they always tell us it's nice and good job, So we're always looking for people that are willing to try this stuff. And you can get involved with the community that way and support your local developers that way.
Yeah, that is, again, incredibly important to know. Okay, at this time, we're just going to quickly finish up with our questions, but we do have a couple questions that have come in the chat. So first one was just, how long is a typical game jam?
I don't know what Ludum Dare is. Do you, Scott?
Yeah, Ludum Dare actually has 2 jams. They run simultaneously. They do a 2-day one, which is strictly at 48 hours, and then they do a 3-day, which is it's the jam one. The jam one is a little more relaxed, being 3 days, and you can actually work in a team on that one. I tend to actually do that, even though I go solo for quite a few of them. I'll use that one just to get the extra day of development. But if you're really into the competition side of things, the compo is 48 hours, and you have to build the whole game yourself. So all the audio, all the art, all the programming. So get a little more intense, but it's a good challenge if you want to flex some skills.
So typically it seems to be done in a weekend then.
Oh yeah. And then Global Game Jam, I guess I thought. Global Game Jam was 2 days typically, but this year, the first time being online, they expanded it a little bit. They actually had about 5 days. But it allowed for the kind of online communities where people still have day jobs and they can't dedicate a whole week to going towards these. Some ones that we linked on those earlier links there, on the Alberta Make Games site, there's like 7-day FPS. That's another jam. So it's 7 days to make a first-person shooter. There's 7-day RL, which is 7 days again to make a roguelike. And some of the sites that we linked there as well, like itch.io, and then I think there was Indie Game Jams. Is that the one, Craig, that you added in there? Those sites
that's correct.
Yeah, they curate lists of game jams. So you can go on there and you will find a game jam that's like, its topic is clover leaves, for instance. Like you got to make a game about clover leaves or just something random. And you can find almost a jam for like nearly any topic nowadays.
There are some really weird ones too. Like, I don't know if PAX has one, but GDC has something called Train Jam. So there's a train that goes from the East Coast all the way to San Francisco, and developers get on it as they're headed to GDC, and they do a jam on the train. So they generally have one car that's just full of developers that have to make a game by the time they get to San Francisco. So depending on where you get on the train, you have X amount of time, and it's a good way to network before the event.
They spray paint all the windows black in there?
They should.
Yeah.
That's that's fantastic information, because then it's like to know that it's not just what's local, but you can really work with people across the world to create cool things. We did have another question from Glass-Eyed Tiger asking how the online jams have felt in comparison to the in-person ones.
How'd you think, Gally? Because this was our first Global Game Jam one.
Yeah, so I only ever really do Global Game Jam. I haven't done the ones that are typically online, like Ludum Dare. Global Game Jam is always in person. And it definitely has a different flavor. You have a lot less people. I think during COVID too, not just being online, it's the way life is right now. Everyone's sort of stressed and busy, and it is stressful to do a game jam, especially if you're new to it. So, I mean, we saw about half, maybe, the amount of people that we usually get, but the enthusiasm, I think, was still very much there. So we just did it over Discord. We'd have little coffee meetups where we'd talk about how things were going. People would post progress, and we get all excited about it and stuff. So it's tougher to, I guess, ask that of someone during the world that we live in. But the online format, I don't know if that was the biggest factor, really. It changes the flavor of the event. But yeah, I don't know, because Scott, you do more Ludum Dare type stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this whole move where everyone's had to work remotely, and you kind of get a different feel of the collaboration. So I think it's that same feeling that like if you're working and your team is all remote, right? There was always that awesome kind of creative synergy that you had when you were in the same room and you're in a whiteboard and you can just walk over to someone and tap them on the shoulder and ask a question. That type of stuff is missing. Ludum Dare, though, you went in with that expectation right off the bat. So I think you just worked that way because you had to, and you didn't have any other choice to really do that. Ludum Dare, though, I don't want to discourage, though. People will get together to do a Ludum Dare, but it's usually you're just getting your own team together at the same time, like in the same room. But obviously not in these times, but that's... So yeah, I didn't really have too many problems. Most Ludum Dares I worked by myself. And I think I had a difficulty finding people that could dedicate the time to it. And that was a challenge, right? Because you do have to be pretty passionate about this to dedicate your whole weekend to it. And my partner can attest to how many hours I spent on some of these and, get to bed at about 5 a.m. and then wake up at 7:30 even like 2 hours later just to keep working again. So
I'm sure the newbies to game jams are thrilled to be sleeping in their own beds, though.
Yeah. Well, and sleep, honestly, it is super important. And Allie had a perfect list there where the first years they're just going hard at it, and then later on, like now I do get about like the 6 to 8 hours of sleep in a game jam, and you do refresh yourself, and that problem that was keeping you awake, you solve it like in 5 minutes as soon as you wake up. So it definitely helps.
Craig, have you noticed any big differences with the communities in terms of like engagement or challenges that exist that didn't exist when we were able to be more in person?
I'm sure there are. I'm just not that injected into the separate communities to see it. But yeah, I would say we're all looking forward to getting back to normal.
Yeah, there's definitely something about being in person.
Yeah, I think it being mostly tech related as well. A lot of game developers are just kind of in that space already, so we've kind of embraced that technology and we just go with it, right? Like pushovers, if you will. I don't know. No, I won't go that far, but
just keep growing. If anyone else has any questions, now would be the perfect time to do it. Obviously, we can talk about game development in general in Alberta, game development in general, what the space looks like in Alberta, or we can just keep talking game jams because all of this is incredibly interesting.
I see one question actually. Smash Logic here was asking, is there a list of roles that involved with a game jam? So I kind of the different disciplines of working on a game, right? Between an artist, a programmer, audio, and design. I think at a game jam, you still have to kind of be that indie mindset to it because you are going to be a really small team. You're not going to game jam with 300 people and make the next, AAA game in the weekend. So you still have to have that mindset, and the roles are very, very flexible. You could even start out being the artist and then realize that actually, no, I want to do level design, and then you'll just keep working on that.
So how large is a typical game jam team? Like, are you only running 2 to 5
ish? I'd say.
Yeah, 2 to 5 is pretty good. I've seen teams as big as about 8 to 10 almost, but I wouldn't really recommend that as a first time because that's too big of a team for such a small amount of time. But that 2 to 5 is kind of a really good sweet spot.
Perfect. So yeah, you can't just be like, I just designed barrels.
If you're the artist on the team, you're the artist on the team. You're probably gonna make everything. Yeah.
So we do have another question from Thai Digital, asking about crunch culture and the idea of crunch in gaming. So if you guys have any comments on that.
I see the cringes.
Yeah, I know. Do you see any smoke coming out of here? Yeah, I don't know.
It's a little tough, I guess, for me to comment on, because most of my experience is indie and indie at my own studio. So I get to decide how much time that I spend. And on that front, I would say it is still a thing. Like when we hear about it on Kotaku or whatever, right, in regards to Cyberpunk, it's big studios, there's management issues, there's money plays a factor. But when it comes to indies, I think the grind is more so, like Scott touched on, you work 8 hours a day probably. Very few indies are funded or make enough money to support themselves wholly from what they do. So you end up doing it in the evenings, which can turn into a full-time job, like a second full-time job. So when we developed Ethereum, I would come home from a trades job, so I was quite tired. We'd have supper and I would work on stuff till 9, 10 p.m. and do it again, and then work on my weekends. And we did that for 2 years. And there was no boss telling me I had to do that. I just didn't have any other options. I didn't have funding. It would have taken us years to release if I had gone slower. So when it comes to indies, the struggle, I think, is more so funding. In the AAA space, I'm new to that myself, so I can't speak to it personally. Improbable is, woo, we have a visitor. This is Bubbers. Improbable is a wonderful studio, and a lot of the people I work with are industry veterans and do have those stories, and they are horror stories, but the industry is starting to change. I think developers are less and less willing to put up with that stuff, especially the people in higher positions. And so we'll start to see that change, but it comes a little bit from the developers too, right? We're so passionate that unfortunately it makes us really vulnerable to being pushed to work long hours and move mountains at the cost of our health. So it's this weird trade-off. Scott, I'm going to leave the management and money side of things to you, because I know you're going to take it from there. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah. No, that's great. And even from the software development side of thing, like not the game industry, just from the software industry, there is always going to be a sense of crunch in a way on any project, right? And kind of what Ali was saying there, like the pressures you have from the management and the investors and the shareholders and all that, like they obviously have a lot of risk when they put their money into a project. And some projects you could probably guess a long time ago that they're going to be successful. So it's arguable if, crunch was even worth it. Let Cyberpunk work out for one more year and they probably still would have made a lot of money, right? But that's just, I don't know for sure from the game industry exactly what kind of outside pressures were there at that time, right? I don't think it's a good culture at all. Like, just in my own perspective, even in my industry, those times that I have to work extra hours, all that, it drains on me for sure. And I'll do a worse job when I'm tired. There's no question, right? You make mistakes. You could end up costing them more by those mistakes than, if you were to just have more time to actually work through the problems, right? So, but I do understand. I'll get a page that our servers have gone down and I have to react, right? So there's always those moments, but where what you try to work towards is taking that time elsewhere, right? Like if I worked extra hours now, I should be kind of have the time to rest beyond that, right? Don't just keep going or your health will suffer for sure.
Yeah. And I want to mirror that too. Like when I mentioned, apparently I don't even get my neck anymore. That's a chair now. But when I mentioned that we crunch, I guess if you want to think of it that way as indies, it's not a good thing. We did that possibly at the detriment of our own health. And once you burn out once, you will burn out faster and worse every consecutive time. And it is a downward spiral. It's something you have to be really, really careful with. And after that, I mean, for a good 2-3 months, I had to recover, and I will never do that again. Not for a big studio, not for myself. So it is an issue with the culture, and it's something we as developers have to address and push out. I think it's also something that gamers have to acknowledge their part in, right? As a gamer, when Cyberpunk was announced in like 2014, I have a poster of the original announcement from E3. I was so excited. And of course I wanted it in my hands, right? But not at that cost. I would have rather waited. And the developers read your comments on Twitter, you know, they know what people are saying, and they receive those death threats and all of that themselves. It's a big toxic part of our industry, and on both sides, as developers and gamers, I think we need to combat that and remember that it's people that make games.
I would like just to say a quick thing about game jams and crunch, is that it is self-imposed crunch. I like there really no other way to say it. But with that said, with like global game jam and stuff, we try to stress as much as possible. Be healthy, get your sleep, eat, like all that kind of stuff. Like you don't want to push yourself too hard, and it's at the end of the day, these jams are about having fun. It's not about burning yourself out over a weekend.
Yeah, no, I think that is really important, that like this is self-imposed, but there isn't the pressure to have to kill yourself over getting there. Okay, I have not seen any additional questions in the chat. So at this point, I'd just like to give you each a couple minutes to just like go over something that you think is really important that you would just like to get out to the world about game devs, about game jams, about what you're doing. I think that'd be really, really cool just to give one last piece of advice to anyone that's interested in game development. If you want to do one last, please, or one last sell of game jams, please feel free. Craig, we'll start with you.
Okay. Instead of talking about game jams, I'm just going to say, everyone check out Muffin Fight. It releases on Steam VR on February 19th. It's made here in Calgary, and launch day proceeds all go to the Coloring It Forward Reconciliation Society, which is dedicated to advancing education on Indigenous issues, art, language, and culture.
Perfect. Thank you. Scott.
Yeah, make games. That's all. It's as simple as that. Make some games, try out some different disciplines, try out some pixel art. It's super easy to get into. You can make pixels out of 8 pixels. You can make a character. Try it out. It's super fun.
Wonderful. And then Allie.
Yeah, I would second that. There's never been a better time to make games. There's so many free, wonderful tools out there, resources to learn. As Craig sort of surprised everyone I was reading the chat, we do have a lot of groups, and we have a lot of developers here that you might not know about, and they're all really friendly people who are willing to support you if you need a hand or just don't know where to start, right? So get in there, get your hands dirty, and make sure you send us whatever you make, because I want to play it.
Wonderful. Okay, well, as much as I don't want to cut this off, I think this has to be the end of the What Makes a Game Dev panel here at Solfloss 2021. At this time, I really want to extend a personal thank you, Allie, Craig, Scott, for your fantastic insight, for the conversation that we've had, your knowledge. It has been so great to listen. In the chat there, if you do !game dev or game devs, you can get all of their Twitter information. I'm sure you guys are more than happy to get questions on there. You guys can always do Alberta Makes Games as well. We'll give you all of that information. In addition to thanking them, I would like to thank everyone that is watching today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I think this is really important. I really hope that this panel has helped open up your eyes as to what game development looks like, especially in the Alberta space. And hopefully you feel inspired and encouraged to join your local game jam community. With that note, please stay tuned for the Stumbling into a Bigger Picture panel, which is coming up next. And just thank you guys all. Take care. Have a wonderful Saturday.